it goes right, it's a slice. If it goes left, it's a hook. If it goes straight, it's a miracle. This is Out of Bounds. If it's happening in the world of golf, we're talking about it. Coverage, debate, discussion, pro golf and local golf. Let's do it. This is Out of Bounds. And here are your hosts, Nate Sharman and Josh Durso.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Out of Bounds. Josh Durso and Nate Sharman here, getting you caught up in the world of golf. It is Monday. Pretty interesting setup week this past weekend, getting us feeling a bit more into Euro golf. Huge weekend if you're Rory McIlroy. Nate, did you play any golf over the weekend?
I did, but you know what, Josh, it's just so crazy to me. I was thinking about it this morning. And it's middle of July, and up here in the Northeast, we've gotten a lot of rain. The weather's been kind of weird. You've had the Canadian wildfires too that have kind of thrown a wrench in things a little bit too. So it doesn't feel like, summer's really moved that far. But if you look at the calendar, we're in the middle of July, which is kind of crazy. And also we're at the fourth major of the year. The fourth and final golf major of the season is happening this weekend. And that's just kind of wild because if you're a golfer like myself, or maybe you probably do this too, you kind of take a look at summer and you think about, well, I'm a sports guy. So you take a look at summer and you think about, your four majors, and then you get into football season and summer's over. So that's just kind of how I've always liked to look at things. It's just how crazy, since the PGA Tour schedule has changed over the last few years that we get to the fourth major in the middle of July. It's nuts.
Isn't it crazy that we're also like 5-ish weeks now, right, away from the PGA Tour season being over, including the playoffs? Because you get the playoffs.
Yeah, we got a little more time than that, I would think. But
it intentionally does not conflict with the NFL season. So you figure basically
Labor Day.
Yeah, more or less 5-6 weeks. And it's just, we're going to be talking about the season being over. Just wild stuff.
But then we have the Ryder Cup. So we can keep talking about golf. So we're not out of the woods yet.
Yeah. Don't worry. We'll keep finding things to talk about.
That's for sure.
Let's get into our biggest stories of the week. Number one, Rory McIlroy had an absolutely incredible weekend. Hit some incredible shots coming down the stretch en route to that 68. You were marveling at that shot on the 18th hole before we came on the air here, talking about how incredible that shot was and how it's basically only a shot you see played on the other side of the pond.
Right. I think he had about 210. And he hit like a 2-iron, which, first of all, you don't really play a 2-iron in America. You just don't really have a use for it. You play more of like a 7-wood or an 7-wood or something like that. And but you're using that 2-iron to try to get that leading edge into the turf a little bit easier, which is something a little bit better that you can do over there. And he's only 210 yards away. If Rory were to hit a stock 2-iron, he hit it about 275 yards, if I had to guess. So he's about 205 and he rips that one low under the wind, and it just bounds up and about 15 feet from the hole, and he knocks it in for the wind. The clip is so cool with Josh because he hits that shot, and you can tell he loves it at impact, right? He's staring at it, and then he does a little crouch and he watches it, and it's just an immaculate shot. And it's right after Bob McIntyre, the Scotland native, did a similar thing on 18 too to make birdie to get the clubhouse lead. He was in a little bit of the heather, and he hit a different type of wood. He was a little further away, and he hit a shot to about 5 feet. Looked like he was going to win. Rory said no. Birdie 17 and 18, gets his first win in 2023.
And speaking of that, vaults him to number 2 in the world, number 3 in the FedEx Cup points. A lot of emphasis so far this season about how bad he's played or about how bad he's looked. How do we feel now about Rory's game and the 2023 campaign?
It's absolutely huge, this win for him, because, this has happened, 3 or 4 times at least this season where Rory's had the 54-hole lead and he's no-showed on Sunday. Yeah. And it was looking like that all morning at the Scottish Open too. Like I said, he birdied 17 and 18 to win. He was down 2 with 2 to go, or down 1, one in regulation. It looked like another time, Rory throws another lead away. Everyone loves saying that, right? Especially this season. And I think that really comes down to, Josh, is there's no more PGA Live merger talk for Rory to talk about because, quite frankly, for Rory McIlroy, there's nothing to talk about, right? So he can just go out there and play golf and focus. That's something we've talked about a little bit here on this podcast, is that, he needs to be able to kind of shell that off and just play golf. And that's something that I think he has. And this win is just so big for his confidence because he's able to, tell himself that, I can do this. I played well for the first 3 days and I'm able to convert that into a 72 hole victory. So just really, really impressive from the Northern Ireland native, and not far from his home, right over in Europe too. So certainly a fan favorite as well in that win.
Let's also talk about the fact that, he's the defending FedEx Cup champion, right? Like we are talking about the guy who, if not being prisoner of the moment, I think the complexion of the last year and a half really should look different for him based on how well he played coming down the stretch in the FedEx Cup playoffs last year and where his game has been. Sure, he hasn't converted and he hasn't had wins lately, but he's been around. It's not like he's been T50 and like barely making cuts. Like he's missed 2 cuts all year, and his game has really come into form, frankly, at probably the right time. This is an interesting. He doesn't vault up for me into like favorite territory for the Open Championship, right? But
he is the betting favorite.
But this to me now feels very much like what we saw last year, where his game keeps improving right up until around playoff time, and then he's in position to be able to make a move. And right. I think at the end of the day, that's the bigger concern for these guys. Of course, they want to win majors. But also another item there, I saw a stat over the weekend that he's converted something like 54 or 55% of his 54-hole leads.
That's wild.
Aside from Tiger, who had like a 90-something% conversion rate, there isn't any, like, there is no contemporary, like there is no comparable professional golfer to holding and converting those 50-hole leads. So that, I think everything kind of needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But as for the question, does it change how we feel about Rory's season? You know what? No, I think at the end of the day, if he no-shows the rest of the season, people are going to say what they've been saying for the last, 8 weeks. And if he plays well and gets a couple wins or contends coming down into the end of the FedEx Cup playoffs, or perhaps even wins a major next week, it will be the same in terms of he had a great year, and that'll be the end of the conversation, right? It's like there is no middle ground for this guy in any way, shape, or form.
What do you think about Rory's chances to win at Royal Liverpool, a place that he's won before? Do you think he has a shot at and winning the Claret Jug like he did in 2014? It
is so hard for me to try and figure. Based on what we saw this past weekend, I understand why he's the betting favorite. I just think that there's so much that goes into a major championship. And at the end of the day, one bad round, the old adage, excuse me, you can't win the tournament on Thursday, but you can lose it. You just never know what Thursday or Friday is going to look like. You don't know what the weather is going to be like. You don't know, there's just so many unknowns. Of course, I guess, I'd put him up there with Jon Rahm, and I'd put him up there with Scotty Scheffler. I'd put him up there with, Cam Smith. I'd put him up there with all those guys, because I think if somebody said, you have to have one of them, I'd take any of them and be completely content. I'd feel great about having them in the Open.
Yeah, for me, the stars were aligning, right, the last few weeks for Rory McIlroy. I was thinking about how I wanted to pick Rory McIlroy to win at the Open Championship, right? He's starting to play better, and he's played well all year. They're just those 2 missed cutsies, like you said. Yeah. But besides that, he's played well. We're going to Royal Liverpool. The last spot, he's won a major championship when he won the Claret Jug in 2014. Yeah. The stars were kind of aligning for me. And, was really kind of excited to pick Rory McIlroy and to root for Rory McIlroy in the Open Championship. And I still will, of course, root for him. But it's just so hard to win twice in a row on the PGA Tour. People do it often, people do it, but it's just so hard. And I think that's a bad reason that I don't want to pick him, because, quite frankly, I don't think he can win twice in a row. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Rory McIlroy does win on Sunday. And I'm looking forward to it. I think his game's in the right spot. And I think he's playing well at the right time, too. And he knows how to play over there, too, like I said, with the previous win at that same golf course.
Yeah, and Cam Smith would probably also have something to say about that, too, coming into form, getting a win over on Liv. Anyway, let's get into our second topic of the day, which is just, I know both of us have a ton to say about this, so I'm going to try to keep it pretty concise here. Lydia Ko got absolutely hammered by the rules officials over the weekend, particularly on Sunday. She was assessed a 7-stroke penalty, or 7 penalty strokes in the final round on Sunday for improperly playing preferred lies. An LPGA spokesperson said on the 11th hole, that rules officials were notified that Ko had played preferred lies on number 3, number 7, and number 9. However, preferred lies were only in effect on number 1 and number 10 due to heavy rain at Highland Meadows Golf Club. Lost in all of this nonsense, 24-year-old Lynn Grant puts on a dominating performance, winning by 3 strokes. Just an abomination. Once again, we're talking about one of these stupid rule situations. First of all, what are we doing playing preferred lies on 2 holes out of an entire golf course in a professional event? And number 2, why don't we have rules officials out there? Aren't the rules officials out there so that stuff like this doesn't happen? She just played like the entire front 9, like basically lift, clean, and cheat.
Right.
And nobody noticed. We're talking about an LPGA event. She played lift, clean, and cheat for 10 golf holes, and nobody noticed. It's like, oh,
right.
Hey.
Yeah.
Just insane. Literally insane.
Yeah, why don't they call it in on the first time she did it on number 3 and give her a 2-stroke penalty, and then you're over with it there? That's my first argument. And then my second one is, where's the caddy? Doesn't the caddy know? Lydia should know, obviously know too. The player knows first and foremost, but the caddy is there to kind of guide their player through those kind of things. And Josh, I'm okay with playing lift, clean, and place on a couple different holes. How that golf course is constructed to, just with the hills and stuff like that. It does make a difference where you are on the golf course. So I'm okay with that. But I just think the player and the caddy especially need to just know where they are in that terms of things. So the 7-stroke penalty is really tough to see, but it certainly can be avoided in my mind too. But a couple different errors from all people involved to lead into a really bad story. And I kind of feel bad for Lynn Grant, getting her first LPGA Tour win at the age of 24 really kind of puts a little shadow in it when Lydia Ko is kind of taking some of this limelight there with that story.
Yeah, it's absolutely infuriating, honestly. And the other part of this too is like, what went wrong in the communication, like from a tournament organization standpoint? Like, what went wrong in administering and organizing this tournament that the number 3 player in the world just happened to be unaware that lift, clean, and place was only, preferred lies was only in effect on 2 holes? Like, how does that, I just can't wrap my head around how that even happens. Like, I understand that it's on the caddy and it's on the player to ultimately know the rules, but at the same time, it feels like there's an element of like, how much can you possibly know? How much can you possibly be on top of? And it's on the event, it's on the venue to make sure that this stuff is like clearly marketed so these people know, so they know the players.
I would love to know if Lydia did know or not. Like I doubt she was doing it in a malicious intent, right? Just didn't know. I wonder where, I want to know.
100%.
She didn't, but she didn't talk about it after, right? She didn't have a post-round interview, and she didn't really go to social media to talk about it or anything. From what I saw, maybe she did, but why wasn't there communication in that way too? Because if she was wrong, do you think she would come out and say something like that? Not that she has to, but I'm just curious, kind of where the problems were lied in that situation.
Yeah, it's like what? Well, and I don't know. This whole thing just feels very.
If that happened to me, I'd hop on Twitter immediately after the round and I'd tell everyone what happened in my mind.
Well, it's like, what difference does it make at that point? Like, it happened. It was like over, and she's obviously not having the best of, in terms of her career. This year hasn't been the best year for her. I mean, part of me understands why she just got out of there and didn't talk to reporters, but again, God, this is like, okay, so for Lynn Grant, this is her first real year on tour because her rookie season was completely screwed up because of COVID policies with international travel, right? She maintains her card in 6 starts, gets a bunch of top 10 finishes to keep her card. We should be talking about the young stars of the LPGA Tour. And instead, we're talking about the number 3 player in the world being assessed more than a half dozen penalty strokes after the fact in the final round of your tournament.
Also, the reigning U.S. Open champion from last week, Allison Corpuz, comes in second. too. So you have a player that just won the U.S. Open playing the following week, didn't withdraw, kept playing, and not a lot of talk about that. You saw some of it, but Carpus comes in second place, played well all weekend too. But kudos to Lynn Grant for getting that win. It can't be easy, having that U.S. Open champion staring down and breathing down your neck, right? Try to come out with your first LPGA Tour win. So big kudos to 24-year-old.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, go back and look at the numbers or the cards for anybody who's interested, or even on YouTube for the highlights. She put on an absolute clinic on Saturday.
She did.
Shot, I believe, 62 or 63, was 9 under at one point in her round. I mean, just played an incredible tournament from start to finish.
We got to shout out quickly too before we go. I'll go again off of women's golf. Mia Hammond, the 15-year-old from Ohio, played well on Saturday and Sunday. I talked a little bit about it on TikTok on Friday after she shot those opening rounds 68-68. Yep. She got herself right about the top 20 area. Didn't shoot 68 again, but she did shoot some really good scores too in her first LPGA event at the age of 15. Pretty cool stuff from Mia.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nate, what do we have as far as other results are concerned from this past weekend?
The Barbasol Championship.
Other tournaments.
Yeah, the Barbasol Championship is still going on. In these events these opposite field events, right? You have the Genesis Scottish Open over in Europe last week that takes 75 DP World Tour members. So there's 75 players that would normally play in this tournament that can't get in, that are on the PGA Tour or have status. So they have these opposite fields events like the Barbasol Championship this weekend. They have the Barracuda coming up next weekend, which is a Stableford event, Josh, opposite of the Open Championship, which is a really fun event to watch too. So these tournaments are just such a good stepping stone for some of these guys like Vincent Norman, who eventually got out the win. He doesn't have to play against John Rahm or Scotty Scheffler or Adam Hadwin or any of those names. I know I threw in Adam Hadwin there, but it's just kind of really good opportunity. And I always love to see when players are able to kind of take the bull by the horns, right? And Vincent Norman did that. He had some strong, I think it was Tyler Cohn who was right on his back too, and Norman was able to outlast him in a playoff. So pretty cool stuff, from Norman, able to get his first win on the PGA Tour, and now he has status too. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and over on the senior tour, Steve Stricker looking all of a sudden starting to look dominant, and I'm starting to wonder if we're entering. You and I were talking. I don't know if it was on Saturday or Sunday, or maybe it was Friday. Bernhard Langer, how he's kind of had this run on the senior tour, and I'm starting to wonder now if we're seeing the early days of the Steve Stricker era.
Sure.
I mean, he just seems like the guy who's got all the tools. He's got the game, and he's obviously very young for the senior tour. So I'm just, right. It's starting to feel a bit like that. Corn Ferry at TPC Colorado. Nicholas Lindheim wins by 2 over there. Good stuff all the way around. Interesting. It is a very odd dichotomy now, looking at these purses in these different events. You think about the difference in play, because we've seen some stories now over the last few years of guys very suddenly vaulting up from the Corn Ferry Tour onto the PGA Tour with just a couple wins. And you see like Nicholas here, I believe he won like a couple $100,000 and that's it. When this PIF merger takes place, I'm going to be kind of curious to see how these other tours benefit from that, because I would assume there's going to be more money to go around everywhere, and we can probably see better than $150,000, $200,000 prizes for the guys that win, and also more money for the guys who are on the Corn Ferry Tour grinding week in and week out.
Right. For sure.
John Rahm. He signed a long-term contract extension with Callaway. He's going to be playing a full bag of Callaway Odyssey equipment. He's going to keep repping the Travis Matthew apparel. Apparently, also, he's going to an equity stake in Top Golf. That's a Callaway brand. What do we think? What do we think about that? I know there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about him potentially going to live before, and one of the things that might have been a signal that he would be leaving is if he didn't renew that deal with Callaway. What are we thinking now?
Yeah, definitely, Josh. That was the first thing that I was thinking of. There's just so many question marks, right? With guys Dustin Johnson didn't renew his deal with TaylorMade and now, or with TaylorMade and, and Adidas too. But now he's kind of back on the Team TaylorMade train, right? And wearing Adidas stuff too so far. So some little bit of unknown things going on there with guys. So we'll see with Jon Rahm, what happens there. And also, it's just another win for Odyssey, Josh. You've talked a lot about Odyssey putters and stuff over the last few weeks, and just another win to keep a major champion and world, former world number one and Jon Rahm, at the top with Odyssey putters and lock him in for a while too. And it's just really interesting too with Travis Matthew. That's really an apparel brand that's bloomed over the last few years. I am a former Dick's Sporting Goods employee, sold a lot of Travis Matthew gear and stuff in store too, especially online as well. It's really nice stuff too. And not at a bad price too. So it's a lot of fun to wear that kind of stuff. Also, Josh, working at Silver Creek Golf Club here in the upstate New York, we do a lot of tournaments and stuff too. And there's always a Travis Matthew hole where if you knock it in and you win a set of apparel from Travis Matthew, and Jon Rahm is always on the picture there smiling at you. So you're going to continue to see that for the next few years. Jon Rahm repping the Travis Matthew apparel.
Yeah. It's interesting to me too, because we heard and we talked a lot about these equipment deals and how the exclusivity can sometimes be a catch-22. Good and bad, goes both ways. We talked about Rory McIlroy's struggles with the Stealth 2 driver earlier this year, and how maybe if he wasn't tied down to TaylorMade, that maybe he would have considered something else. It's interesting, seeing that. I guess the part that stood out most to me was that he was committed fully to Callaway through the entire bag. The one thing I didn't have a chance to look into that I guess I was curious about was, is he already playing Callaway from driver down to putter?
Oh yeah, he's a big proponent of the Epic Woods as well.
Yeah, oh, yeah. So I guess there's no major change there.
No, not really.
You and I have joked a million times that if we had to play one brand from top to bottom of the bag, it would be Callaway. Yeah,
it would be Callaway. We are proponents of that Epic driver, right? I have the Rogue now, but one of my favorite drivers that I've had has won that Epic Speed. So definitely, I would vote Callaway if I had to play any golf brand.
Yeah. So let's get into our question of the week. Surprise of the 2023 PGA Tour season. If you had to pick one player, either playing better or worse than expected, who is it? Who do you have?
For me, it's Justin Thomas on the bad side. It's just so weird to see, this former major champion, Justin Thomas, play so struggling. He hasn't won on tour this season, coming off that win at the PGA Championship last year in Illinois. I thought, Justin Thomas was going to rip off a few this year, but it just hasn't been there for JT. Has played a little better of late. But why this is really surprising to me, Josh, is he's not a shoo-in to get on the U.S. Ryder Cup team in Rome coming up. He's got to really have to play good golf. He played okay at the Scottish Open, made the cut there and was kind of hanging around, but not really in contention. We'll see what he does at the Open Championship, but he's really got to show Zach Johnson that he's on this team. And it's going to be really interesting to see if they leave Justin Thomas off that team, because that's going to be a lot talked about. But right now, there's a lot of people, and it may even include myself. I know you're on the train that Justin Thomas doesn't deserve to be on this U.S. Ryder Cup team. So we'll see what JT does in the next few weeks, and as we get into the playoffs here on the PGA Tour schedule, and see what happens with Justin Thomas, because Zach Johnson may have a tough decision to make with Justin Thomas.
Yeah, and I would not want to be the one who has to make that final decision, even though I think if that decision were the one made, it would be the right one. Mine is on the opposite end of the spectrum, Wyndham Clark. He was ranked 163rd coming into this season. He's ranked 10th in the world now. He's got 2 wins. He's a major winner, just from nothing to something seemingly overnight. But I think the stats would tell the story a little better, honestly. He's 14th on the tour this year in strokes gained total. Scoring average, he's 10th overall. And front nine scoring average, which is kind of an interesting stat, he's 3rd on tour. He is just playing. Obviously, there was a lot of emphasis on his putting, especially in that major victory he had. So he is just, his game is so complete. And he is a guy who I don't think anybody would have had on their radar coming into this season. And yet here he is, a lock for the Ryder Cup. And honestly, a guy that if we fast forwarded 3 or 4 years and we learned that he had 3 or 4 majors, wouldn't be surprised, because he's got the length, he's got the short game, and he's proven that he can do it on essentially the toughest circumstances imaginable.
Yeah, he's been interesting to watch too over the last few weeks. We'll definitely be seeing Wyndham Clark as a staple, I think, on the PGA Tour the next few years. A shoo-in for the Ryder Cup, coming up here soon. Josh, our last topic of the day. We've been talking about the Open Championship coming up. We're not going to do our extreme betting show like we usually do. Head on over to our social channels. We'll be kind of putting that out the next few days, kind of some of our favorite bets. But I just want to know, do you have a pick for us? A quick pick. Don't think too much about it of who's going to win the Open Championship this week at Royal Liverpool.
You know what? For the last month, I've had this feeling that Cam Smith is that guy. And I don't know exactly what it is. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people listening and watching who say he's over on Live. You can't say that you can't pick him because he's not playing week in and week out against the PGA Tour guys. But look, he's the defending champ. And I know there's going to be, he's got the game to do it. That's it. Right. He's got the game to do it.
And that would be make 50% of your champions this year in the majors dedicated to Live, which would be a little bit more of a fun argument if they weren't merged now. If you had talked about that in the beginning of the season, but I like that. I like that pick of Cam Smith. I'm going to stay on Live too. Brooks hasn't won a British Open yet, the Open Championship. I think this is his time for him to do it. Don't have a ton of analysis behind it for Brooks, but I just think he's a gamer and he's healthy right now. He's playing some of the best golf he's played in his career in the last few years. So I would be very surprised if Brooks isn't hanging around too for the Claret Jug on Sunday for the Open Championship.
Do you need data or stats when you're picking Brooks Koepka? The guy is just straight up dominant when he plays well. Just dominant. I mean,
let me know if he's healthy or not. That's really the only thing I need to know.
Yeah, exactly. So picks, we will have, we'll be putting out betting videos over the next 2 days. So watch for those on TikTok and YouTube on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. It's Monday right now as we record this. So that will be that. And we will be back next Monday for another episode, full episode of the podcast. But hey, that is going to do it for this edition of Out of Bounds. Watch for our full betting lineups this week on TikTok and YouTube before things get started across the pond. Subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. And of course, if you're out there playing this week or this weekend, you know the drill. Whether it's down the middle or out of bounds, keep on swinging.
You've been listening to Out of Bounds. If it's coverage, debate, or discussion of pro and local golf, we'll be talking about it. Be sure to visit the website. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. See you next time on Out of Bounds.